John stopped in front of the old coastal house he once called home. The windows were cracked, the paint was peeling, and the wind made the broken shutters slam like ghosts of the past. But then a dim light flickered inside. Impossible. No one had lived here for 3 decades. At least that's what John believed. The rusty sign at the entrance of Clearwater Cove still stood. Population 2,847. It used to be more, back when John lived here with his wife Sarah and their daughter Emma. At 60 years old, his hands still carried the marks of a carpenter, strong but tired. As he drove through the small town, everything felt familiar yet painfully distant. The bakery was gone, the old dock rebuilt, and strangers walked the streets he once knew by heart. He hadn't planned to return, not ever, but a sudden letter from an unknown lawyer had changed everything. Urgent. Regarding your property, please return. When he reached the coast, his breath caught. There it was. The blue two-story house, weathered, broken, abandoned. His shoes crunched over weeds as he approached the porch. Every step was a memory. Emma's first bike ride, summer barbecues, Sarah laughing at the sea breeze. The front door was slightly open. Inside, dust coated everything, but beneath it, a scent. One he hadn't smelled in 30 years. Sarah's perfume. His body froze. And then, Dad! A voice. A young woman's voice. John turned sharply. A girl in her 20s stood on the stairs. Brown hair. Familiar eyes. Emma's eyes. Sarah's eyes. I'm not your daughter, she said softly. My name is Grace. I'm your granddaughter. John felt the world tilt beneath him. They sat in the old living room as Grace explained the story John never knew. The night of the house fire in 1995. John and Sarah had argued about money. A small electrical fault caused a fire hours later. In the chaos and smoke, Sarah died. And Emma survived, but slipped into a coma for months. Doctors had struggled to reach John. Records were messy, names were confused. And after Sarah's death, in the fog of grief, John believed Emma had died too. He left the town crushed by guilt, believing he had lost everything. Grace continued with a trembling voice. Mom woke from the coma. She tried to find you later, but you had already disappeared. She became a teacher, raised me alone, and never blamed you. John's hands shook. Where is she now? He whispered. Grace tried to smile, but tears spilled. She passed away last year. Cancer. John closed his eyes. 30 years of guilt pressed down on him like a collapsing world. Grace handed him a faded envelope. Mom wanted you to have this. He opened it slowly. Dad, if you're reading this, it means Grace has found you. That night was no one's fault. I grew up loving you, even from afar. I hope you forgive yourself the way I forgave everything. Love, Emma, John cried silently. For the first time, the weight began to shift. The next morning, John took out his old carpentry tools from the truck. Grace had sketches of how she dreamed the house could look again. Together, they started it rebuilding. John repaired the frame, sanded the floors, restored the stairs. Grace painted the walls, cleared the garden, fixed the broken shutters. Neighbors noticed and joined in. Bill, the electrician, rewired the house. Margaret planted flowers Sarah had once loved, lavender and hydrangeas. Emma's old teacher brought childhood photos Grace had never seen piece by piece, memory by memory. The house came back to life, and with every nail hammered, every board replaced, John felt his heart rebuilding too. Weeks passed. The house looked brighter than it had in decades. John made morning coffee and watched the sunrise from the porch. The same porch where he once held little Emma in his arms. Grace visited often, bringing her 5-year-old twins, Noah and Lily. John taught them simple carpentry, birdhouses and toy boats. Their laughter filled the house with life again one afternoon. Grace found an old VHS taped inside a forgotten drawer. Emma, 14th birthday. They watched it together. On the screen, Sarah placed a birthday crown on Emma's head. John, from 30 years ago, appeared too. Young, smiling, proud. Grace watched him with soft eyes. That's the smile Mom always described, she said. For the first time in decades, John didn't feel like a ghost of his old life. He felt present. Months later, John visited Sarah's grave for the first time since the fire. He laid fresh lavender and whispered, Sarah, after all this time, I found Emma's daughter. I found Grace. I forgave myself. I hope you forgive me too. A breeze swept through the cemetery, lifting the flowers gently. John felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. John opened a small carpentry workshop behind the house. The townspeople came for handmade tables, shelves and frames, but the workshop wasn't about business. It was about passing on a legacy. Grace's twins visited every weekend, building little wooden boats and tiny furniture with their grandfather. John told them stories about their great-grandmother Sarah and their grandmother Emma, keeping their memories alive. The restored house eventually became a local landmark, the Taylor House, a home reborn. Every evening, John sat on the porch, watching the children chase each other in the yard, listening to the sound of waves crashing below the cliff. He had run away from this house for 30 years, but now it was where he found himself again. Home wasn't a place frozen in the past. It was a place rebuilt with love. And finally, after decades of silence, pain, and regret, John felt free.